I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the China-U.S. Trade talks. And after the G20 meeting between Trump and Xi, it looks like everything is now back on track. It looks like that Trump has met China halfway. He has agreed to back off a little on Huawei. And he's also agreed to not place any more tariffs on China, it appears at the moment, but also looks like he's keeping a lot of the other tariffs in place. It seems that the Chinese also met the United States halfway, and we're now talking again, and I think that's a good thing. What do you think, Alexander?
No, I agree. I mean, from all accounts, the atmospherics of this meeting were very good. Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, person to person, get on quite well. Apparently, just as Putin and Trump, when they meet, get on quite well. But of course, when they talk about trade, Trump and Xi are obviously concerned about the interests of their own countries. And they both calculated correctly that an all-out trade war between them is not good for either of them. The US economy is showing signs of fragility. The Chinese economy also. Donald Trump's part of Donald Trump's electoral base, the agricultural community is starting to hurt. Some of US telecoms companies, chip makers and such people, are upset because they're not able to sell to Huawei to the extent that they could do. And of course, the Chinese don't want to see more tariffs. So what we got out of this meeting was a kind of ceasefire, a careful trade-off. I think, by the way, that some of the people in the United States who are talking about some kind of Donald Trump climb down over Huawei are being actually wrong and rather irresponsible at this very delicate stage in the negotiations. What has been agreed is that there'll be some easing off on restrictions of selling technology, of US technology and chips to Huawei, which will satisfy some American technology companies. The Chinese, in return, have apparently made some kind of agreement to buy more agricultural goods from the US. That has practically stopped. And both sides have agreed to resume the trade talks, with the US holding off from imposing more sanctions, more tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, it's important to say that there was practically an agreement between the Chinese and the US on trade a few weeks ago, and it failed because the Chinese looked at the proposal that had been put together and which their negotiating team appeared to have agreed, and found that it was unacceptable in all sorts of ways. So the fact that there's going to be a renewed negotiation is in some ways a concession by Donald Trump to the Chinese, because it basically says, I accept that the old deal that we almost seem to have agreed to is dead. But he is giving nothing away, and the threat to impose more tariffs on Chinese goods remains there. So this is a sensible ceasefire in the trade war. It allows both sides freedom to maneuver and to try and put the thing, as you rightly said, back on track. Donald Trump has conceded nothing of significance on Huawei. He's helping his agricultural exporters and his own high-tech exporters. And Xi Jinping, in return, he's got some easing of restriction on Huawei, but he's also got the trade talks restarted with the previous agreement, abortive agreement, now finally dead. So I think this was intelligent negotiations by two sides coming together and moving forward and putting all the anger and bitterness and rude language of the last couple of weeks to one side.
Yeah, but can you say that the anger, the rude language, the Huawei stuff, all of this is part of Trump's negotiating style? The big ask he's asking for a lot in the beginning, and then he kind of retracts, and now he's, back to asking for more sensible things. I mean, it seems to me like this is very much in line with the type of negotiator that Trump is.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think that is very much how Donald Trump conducts negotiations. He takes very tough positions. He is extraordinarily threatening. He gives the impression that he's prepared to knock over the entire table and blow the negotiations up. He looks for the other side to be intimidated and back down. If they're not intimidated and they don't back down, and the Chinese weren't going to be intimidated and weren't going to back down, well, he will come back and he will negotiate, hoping that in the meantime, his very, very tough tactics will have softened the Chinese up a little. So it's very much his negotiating strategy. You go to his book, his famous book, The Art of the Deal, a lot of it is there. The problem is, as I've said before, the Chinese, tough negotiators though they also are, have a different way of conducting negotiations, and it may take them some time to figure it out. And the danger is that, if they think that Donald Trump is playing with them too hard, that they might also start to actually harden their positions rather than to soften them. But my major concern, I have to say this now, is not with the Chinese, but looking at some of the commentary in the US. I've been listening to people like Schumer and Warren and Marco Rubio. Rubio is talking as if this, as I said, very minor concession to Huawei is some kind of major concession. He's talking about legislation to tie Donald Trump's hands. Warren and Schumer are also talking about, Donald Trump backing down in some strange way. And I find all that very disturbing. And I hope that people don't act on these sort of threats and let Donald Trump and Xi Jinping and their respective negotiators work with this thing. Because if those kind of sentiments really start to take hold, and if we really do see Congress legislating against Huawei, then frankly, as I said, that will wreck the negotiations completely, and we really will be in an unending trade war in that case.
And what would happen then if Congress does legislate against Huawei and sabotages Trump? And what would be the Chinese reaction to this?
Well, I mean, the Chinese
they wouldn't hold Trump responsible for it.
No, they wouldn't hold Trump personally responsible. I mean, they have a very acute understanding of the U.S. political system, and they will understand very well that Donald Trump is not responsible for the collapse of the negotiations, but they will conclude that a trade deal with the United States is impossible because Congress and the American political elite are now so hostile to them, and they will adjust their economy accordingly. So you will see across the board reciprocal tariffs on US goods, and this drift apart between China and the US, which, to be very clear, is going to happen anyway, will now accelerate. I mean, if I just mention a point about that, I mean, Huawei is not going to be very impressed by this deal that was just done between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. They're going to accelerate development of their own technologies now and their own production, no matter what, because, of course, they don't really trust these assurances that Donald Trump is giving. And when they read what Marco Rubio and co are saying, well, that will make them trust the US even more. But it's always better, if we're going to go for a divorce or a disengagement in trade, to do this in a civilized and structured way than to have a total collapse in the relationship. And if we have Congress imposing those kind of legislations on Donald Trump, a collapse is what we're going to get.
That's a good way of looking at it. It seems that the divorce is going to happen one way or another.
Yeah.
And now we're at this stage where can this divorce, take place with the two partners divorcing but remaining friends? Or are they going to divorce and be hostile enemies?
Well,
and you have all these other forces like the Rubios and the Warrens and the Schumers who are pushing
yes.
for a hostile type of divorce.
Exactly. I mean, and to be very clear, there are people within Donald Trump's own administration who are pushing for a hostile divorce also, and who see China as an enemy and as a rival of the United States, which must be crushed as if it's possible, as if it were possible to crush a country like China. I mean, an idiotic thing, but I've actually read people talk in that kind of fashion. But Donald Trump clearly, on the strength of what happened at Osaka, at the G20, doesn't think in those terms. And not for the first time, he is showing a great deal more sense and understanding than many of his critics.
And that's going to drive his critics crazy, that's for sure.
Oh, well, of course.
I mean, Trump had a good G20. I mean,
yes, he did.
All in all, everything considered, it seemed like it was a very successful G20, especially with regards to China, to Russia, even to Germany and Merkel. He even seemed to show, good diplomacy there.
Absolutely. He dominated it. I mean, he was the central figure. I mean, he dominated the G20. I mean, the two really big meetings between that happened were Donald Trump meeting Putin and Donald Trump meeting Xi Jinping. And it's very, very interesting that this meeting with Putin didn't come in for the kind of hysterical criticism that previous meetings between Putin and Trump have come in for. It's almost as if post-Mueller, people are now finally letting Donald Trump get on with his deal-making and with his negotiating. And Putin-Trump was important. Trump-Xi was more important still, or at least more urgent still. And we see Donald Trump moving forward and doing things and acting in a way that he judges is in the interests of the United States, and he's allowed to do it, and he's managing at the same time to strengthen his personal relationships with other world leaders, including with Putin and Xi. Now, can I just say, and I've said this before, and sometimes I've been sort of criticized when I say it, Donald Trump is an instinctive diplomat. I mean, he is somebody who believes that diplomacy matters. He actually likes having connections and relations and interfaces with world leaders. He likes to talk with them. He likes to listen to them. He likes to discuss things with them. Barack Obama, his predecessor, didn't do diplomacy at all. He stayed in the White House. He met people very rarely, met other world leaders very rarely spoke to them on the phone. When he did, it was all very ritualistic and extremely carefully prepared, and he came across as extremely aloof, and other world leaders, apart from Angela Merkel, didn't terribly like him. With Donald Trump, it's quite different. Putin, Xi, Abe of Japan, all these other leaders, they like him at a personal level. They get on with him. They understand how he thinks, and he treats them in a way that they, can relate to. But he has this enormous problem that the United States is this very, very difficult country to keep on track on anything, and that there are an awful lot of people in the United States who are so obsessed with partisan ideas and with ideology that it's very difficult to get anything through Washington which anybody there is opposed to.
So what's the timeline now, Alexander, going forward?
Well, we will see. I mean, at some point we're going to see these talks resume, these trade talks resume. I would guess that sometime around September or October, we will get a fairly good sense of where all this is going and whether these negotiations are going to reach any sort of satisfactory outcome. My own view is that perhaps they won't, But the longer the negotiations go on for, the more time there is for both China and the US to gradually prepare for the civilized divorce, which I was talking about.
Okay, Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on that subscribe button down below. Click on the notifications bell. Also remember to hit that like button as well. And you can go to the Duran shop and you can pick up a t-shirt. You can pick up a polo shirt like the gray polo, I believe with the black embroidered eagle is what Alexander
That's right.
wearing.
It's beautiful in black embroidered
Of course, we have our magic mugs, which improve your geopolitical IQ. Maybe we can call it your GQ.
Well, indeed, sir.
By a number of points. So,
indeed, sir.
Alexander, you have a couple of words there to
yes,
say,
absolutely.
well, what's the tea that you're drinking today?
Well, what's the tea that I'm drinking? I've actually brought the caddy with me. This is Whittard. Whittard of Chelsea is one of our major tea importers. And since we were talking about China, I actually got a Chinese tea, which is called Big Red Robe. It's actually an oolong tea. So it's slightly fermented. It's amazing. It's a most amazing aroma. And it's one of the very, very top teas of China. This was a tea that was made for the emperor. It was first produced in the 16th century. And there are only a few tea bushes that actually produce the leaves that make it. Now, this actual version that I've got is not from those bushes, unfortunately, because they're now protected. But it is from bushes that are made from grafts and are in the same area. So this is one of the most elite and expensive teas. But it's the kind of tea that Xi Jinping will be drinking. So since he's meeting with Donald Trump, I thought I would drink a tea like this. And I'm drinking it, of course, from my own very own magic cup, with the eagle, which points to the east and to the west. So this is an eagle that also takes in China. It's a perfect mug for drinking a tea like this. It's beautiful porcelain. Remember, the Chinese invented porcelain, but this is a really handsome, beautiful porcelain. And by the way, if you hit it, you can hear the sort of ring, which is a good sign of a really good porcelain mug. If it doesn't have that sort of ring and lightness about it, when the body, the porcelain body, you got a cheap, bad mug. This is actually a very, very good mug, if I may say. Perfect for drinking an elite tea. So I'm drinking Xi Jinping's tea. He should drink from a Duran mug. I think if he does, we must get a mug to him, because I think he will find that it complements his tea perfectly, and it refreshes us and enlarges our minds and makes it possible for us to appear on these programs. And of course, this is the other mug, which I always borrow because it's from Catherine. And may I make it very clear here that this is also the double-headed eagle, and there's St. George slaying the dragon. This is not the Chinese dragon, which is a good dragon. This is a wicked, bad dragon, which represents lies, untruth, and falsehood, all the things that the Duran battles. And as you correctly say, Alex, I am doing all of this whilst wearing this really elegant polo shirt with my black double-headed eagle there. Complements it beautifully because it's got lovely color, actually. And again, it's 100% cotton, incredibly nice to wear. Yesterday was a very hot day in London, 34 degrees. By our standards, that's hot. Today, the temperature has fallen to 22 degrees. It was perfect for both days. It's really comfortable to wear in all sorts of weathers. It's smart, it's stylish. Buy one, help the Duran, and help yourself. And get admiring glances when you wear it.
All right. Then you can also help us out by donating to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. The links are in the description box down below. And don't forget, before we leave, you can get a copy of this show in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and Soundcloud. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody. Take care.